My expectations for Marianne are very low, and she managed to underperform them in this interview, which is quite remarkable. Where this was Brie at her best. We'll talk about it, but when me and Keaton were talking about this offline, because he had his own encounter with Marianne, I talked about how anyone who's going to interview her and push back, you can sense she's such a deranged narcissist that you have to butter her up if you want to ask a hard question. Yeah. Which at certain points in the interview, Brie does. She was very masterful here, and full credit. We will certainly discuss at some point why all of these podcasters propped her up to begin with. But at the moment, credit where credit is due. Brie did a great job. So let's take a look at the first segment, in which Marianne decries how distorted her image has been by people like Norman Finkelstein.
How do you feel like you were lied about or misrepresented?
Well, let's say your friend Norm Finkelstein. I would be willing to bet $100. He's never read my books.
Marianne Williamson is an airhead. I really wish Marianne Williamson, I'm sorry, I'm getting sick of this. I wish she would just shut up.
Yeah, there's been this image of me as intellectual lightweight from somebody, like I said, who hasn't read my books. There's a term, and hasn't come up to hear me speak. There's a term, what is it? Contempt prior to investigation. So I take 100%.
Okay. Marianne, you feel that you would benefit from Norman Finkelstein reading your books and attending your lectures, which are based on A Course in Miracles, written by a woman who claims that the text was dictated to her by the voice of Jesus. You feel that that is what would disabuse Norman Finkelstein of the notion that you're a lightweight and an airhead who has no business opining on the situation in the Middle East. Is that your contention? Is that what you're claiming here?
If I wanted to know which flavor incense to burn after an early lunch at the Chinese buffet in my bathroom, I would happily defer to the expertise of Marianne Williamson by reading one of her books.
Marianne, you should be thanking your lucky stars, as you probably do already, every day that Norman Finkelstein has not bothered to read one of your books and rip it apart in one of his interviews, as he certainly would. All right, so moving along.
So I take 100% responsibility for my own experience. We even had somebody who'd infiltrated the campaign. I was afraid I couldn't get rid of that person because I thought the press would go nuts. I should have just done it.
When you say infiltrated, from where? Can you?
Well, I'm not going to go into it, but I will tell you this. There are political hitmen. There are political operatives who infiltrate campaigns like mine. But what?
Okay. All right. So we have covered quite a bit Marianne's over 30-year history, reported history of abusing staff, mismanaging organizations, driving people out of everything she's ever been involved in or a part of, literally, physically, allegedly physically attacking people. Now, probably the best overall article on this that has been written was done by Jen Dees. Is that how you say her name?
I think it's Dyes, yeah.
Jen Dyes. So if you want more on this, we are going to put the link in the comments. We've litigated this in the past. We don't want to turn this into an hour segment. Also, you can look at our video, Kyle Lies to Defend Marianne Williamson, I think it's called, where we got into a lot of that history. And just so you know, the last real breaking story on this, which inspired this article, was 7 of her staffers anonymously wrote a letter begging people not to get involved in her campaign because of the abuse that they suffered. And also, as this article gets into, they all said straight out, she's just looking for another audience because the Oprah appearance days are over. She's not able to tap into those large audiences anymore. So she's trying to tap into the political audiences by running essentially a book tour disguised as a campaign. If you want to know why she unsuspended her campaign, that's a pretty good explanation for it. Like, for what reason? Biden has the delegates. What do you think? They're going to flip to you? So what is she doing it for? It's to keep herself out there. So presumably, we don't know. I would guess that she's talking about Peter Dow when she's talking about an operative. We don't know that.
We don't know that, but you would assume, I mean, the guy gets accused of that everywhere he goes for a reason, I would assume. And like he always leaves the campaign in worse shape than where he found it. I mean, she won't say Peter Dow. Notice she wouldn't give any follow-up answers to anything that she said in this interview. She would make a claim, and then Briahna would ask her to substantiate it, and she'd be like, I'm not going there.
No, absolutely. Briahna, in that first section, told her more than once, hey, Marianne, if you feel that your image has been distorted, I think this is a great opportunity for you to specifically say in what way, and she never does.
Right.
She never does. She just throws out these vague charges like this without saying, well, I actually believe this, but people claim I believe this. She never does that.
Right.
In the entire interview. So continuing the abuse, smearing staff when they leave. Quote, since leaving, I have realized I should also have been afraid of how the campaign would talk about me to the media, one former staffer said. Williamson has claimed that former staffers who complain about how her campaign is being run don't know what they're talking about. She has insinuated that those departing with anything negative to say had sinister intentions, were in step with the DNC, or were inept, a similar tactic she used against staff who spoke out from her 2020 campaign. Quote, allegations of former staff and volunteers being DNC plants is not just personally hurtful, it's personally harmful, a former staffer says. Former campaign volunteers Courage News spoke with have expressed distrust and unease over how Williamson has handled staff departures. Quote, the people who are close to her within the campaign tell volunteers and supporters these people are bad. These people are evil, unquote. Former volunteers also report that they have been ostracized from online progressive groups by current volunteers after no longer supporting Williamson. The campaign really just wants to blacklist former volunteers, supporters, and staff who speak out, one alleges. Another source asserts urgently in relation to the smears, Marianne is siphoning off funds, time, and energy from people who would describe themselves as left-wing with no real intention of becoming president of the United States. And you can see at the bottom here, we're not going to read through it, but she's notorious for making everyone sign an NDA. That's why everyone's always anonymous in these articles. We have had fun with this infamous quote of hers from a People magazine story in 1992. As I said, this is out there for a long time. You're fucking with my livelihood. I'm famous. I don't need this, damn it. She supposedly screamed at her team back then. So that's the Marianne Williamson who is here claiming that her campaign was sabotaged. All right, so now she gets into the RBN thing.
What was it that I said on RBN that you're referring to? Because I know even in private you referred to that as a big faux pas on my part. What did I say on that show? And then I could respond to it. My support for Israel should not be at the expense of my Jewish values. And as an American, my support for Israel should not be at the expense of my democratic values. Right now, it's becoming that way, and that's a problem.
Marianne, I appreciate the answer, but I talked to the Palestinian Community Network, got a lot of Palestinian allies. They will not find that to be an acceptable answer. It's one. Well, I know. I don't know. Have one state where everyone have equal rights under the law. The Israel Zionists are not to be trusted to implement a two-state solution, as that's been shown many and many times. So I hope you have conversations with some of the Palestinians. That's a hard.
My head about my recollection.
All right, so just a lot of credit to Nick there, because you hear what he's saying. He was a year ahead of everybody else, right? I mean, nobody was really talking about this, ourselves included. Nobody was really talking about this. And you hear what he's saying now, it's like a conversation from a year later. that he was trying to have with her that she was not very happy about.
And you notice he was very respectful there, too. He was not aggressive. I appreciate the answer, but my Palestinian friends would not be satisfied with that. Like, there's nothing there's nothing hostile about that. This is what when you deal with a narcissist like this, they react with hostility to anything but flattery.
Yeah, for brevity, I just grabbed a short clip that kind of encapsulates it. But after that, she starts to get hostile with him, and he's very... retiring. He says, well, we're having a conversation. And
we're having a conversation.
If anyone wants to watch that, that's still up over at RBN.
Election was that they broadly, after the fact, charged you with being a Zionist.
Bit about Zionist. I never said the word Zionism has been so changed over the years. The original concept, like as I was brought up, was the idea that Israel had the right to exist, not that no one else did. So I stay away from that word now because of what it means to so many people. So I did not say on that show or anywhere else those words. My commitment to the belief that Israel has a right to exist is no more and no less than my commitment to the fact that the Palestinians also have the right to a Palestinian state.
Explicitly.
Okay. So this is very typical of this whole interview. She litigates whether or not she called herself a Zionist as if that is what is at issue. Talks about how the term Zionism has been distorted, sets up this straw man, and then describes her belief, which are Zionism as most people understand Zionism. She tries to litigate the term Zionism, whether she said Zionism, as if what RBN are alleging is that she said Zionism rather than that she is a Zionist.
Yeah, she's trying to make it sound like the word Zionism has morphed into something that connotes, genocidal or murderous intent, which by definition, it does not necessarily. Of course, there are some Zionists who happen to be genocidal wackos, but there are the so-called liberal Zionists like Marianne Williamson who believe in a Jewish state with special rights and privileges, really, for Jewish people, but who also want to be humane to the apartheid victims, right? And that's basically liberal Zionism, right? We shouldn't kill the Palestinians. We should give them their own state while denying them rights in our state because our state is a Jewish state. That is what mainstream Zionism is. That is racist, in my opinion, as a Jew. Yes, as a Jew. Yes. But that is obviously the mainstream definition of Zionism. If Zionism were defined in the mainstream as something genocidal and murderous, then support for Israel would not be a mainstream thing. It would be a fringe thing. In my opinion, under the current setup, in other words, as Israel functions, it should be a fringe thing, but it's not. The reason it's not is because Zionism does not mean the straw man that she is setting it up to mean here. Zionism means you believe in a Jewish state with special rights for Jewish people and controlled borders, obviously, to maintain a majority Jewish population inside it.
Right. She's yes, exactly. That is exactly what you're being accused of, Marianne. Yes, that is it. You are.
And you seem to not be challenging
a Zionist,
right? And you don't seem to have any real answer to the substance of that. You just kind of filibuster and straw man and dodge. Well, Zionism doesn't mean what it used to. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
To most people.
Yeah.
Yes. This is like watching, and you did have people like this, people who considered themselves conscientious South Africans under apartheid. That is what a liberal Zionist is. I don't approve of the suffering. I don't think people should suffer, so they should have their own separate place away from the Jews. That's your position. We were talking about this before. In Living Color, years ago, decades ago, did a satire of after the fall of apartheid in South Africa, there were a bunch of merchant ivory kind of movies that centered the experience of white people and how, conscientious white people who were very disturbed by apartheid, basically driving Miss Daisies, where you're going to do something about racism from a white point of view, and how affected white people of conscience were by this, rather than to center the experience of the people actually suffering from it. So they had the whole movie was the woman writing letters, and I was very disturbed by what I saw, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote another letter. That's what these kinds of Zionists are. Yeah, no, I support the whole system, but I'm very bothered by it. I'm very bothered by it. I had a conversation with somebody the other day and told them how bothered I was by it.
Right.
Okay, so what good does that do for the Palestinians who are being murdered right now? What is that doing for them?
Right.
So now this is really the meat of it. And I didn't cut this at all. The last 3 minutes of this interview are really fucking remarkable. Really remarkable. Any claims that Marianne might make to Norman Finkelstein in the future that she is not an airhead are completely dispelled by this 3 minutes of her wisdom.
Netanyahu and others have said the problem is that if there is a right of return, the population balance skews it so that it is no longer a Jewish state, right? So how do you negotiate that maintaining a Jewish state requires the exclusion of non-Jewish people, regardless of their rights to return to their homeland? And I mean, how do you parse that without understanding that is what people are objecting to about the nation of Zionism? Not the idea that Jewish people can move, the way everyone should be able to move.
Objecting to. We have
I'm sorry?
Not the only thing people are objecting to. And there's a
Why
lot.
do you say that?
Because it's not. Because it's absolutely not. And there's a lot of land to talk about where.
Okay. That is Marianne in a nutshell. She's implying anti-Semitism, but she won't answer it. She won't actually say it because these liberal Zionists really, really are hesitant to openly state that they believe being anti-Zionist is anti-Semitic. So she drops the implication, and Bree, she was great here. She doesn't let her get away with it. She pushes because it's not. That's her answer. Because it's not. It's absolutely not.
Well, let's reward Bree's skills by playing the video so that she doesn't have to live with this image of her, this freeze frame, for much longer.
Absolutely. The Israelis should not be there. Those settlements should not exist. There should not be Israeli occupation of the West Bank. So you're talking about the right of return in a way that I'm actually not going to go into because that's the kind of thing that needs to be negotiated. And I do remind
negotiated
you
how? You're not going into it because you're a fucking coward. That's why you're not going into it. It's the same reason why Dean Phillips, to your credit, Dean Phillips will basically come out and say, no, he's against the right of return. So actually, Dean Phillips is less of a coward than you. More of a scumbag than you, but less of a coward than you. So there you go. Anyway, we'll keep going.
Of Israeli population is Arab Palestinian. A Palestinian.
And what?
Okay, I need to knock this down every time one of these fucking Zionist scumbags makes this equivalency. Those are people who are descendants of, or in some rare cases at this late date, the people themselves who managed not to get driven out in the Nakba. And ultimately they were given Israeli citizenship. But if you are Palestinian and you are not among this group, you cannot, even by marriage, immigrate into Israel and gain citizenship in Israel. They always use. So why do they allow this 20% Arab population? It's their fig leaf. Every Zionist hides behind it when they get pressed on this.
Yes.
What if it were 51%?
I'm not going there, Bree.
Again, she's
I'm not
going
having
there.
this conversation.
Look,
I'm staying with what
we'll do this every 5 seconds, so I promise I'll let it go. But why is she not going there? She's not going there because she does not want to say what she actually believes, which is that, no, a Jewish state must control its borders such that the Jews remain the majority population, i.e., it must be maintained as an ethno-state.
Right.
That is what she is saying.
It is, well, and this
just because you say you're not going to go there doesn't mean we don't see through that. We're not fucking stupid.
Clearly. And this is what the post-October 7th genocide has forced to the surface. The entire construction of Israel is racist. It is an apartheid state. The very premise of Israel is an apartheid premise. look, especially from an American perspective, and you're supposed to be liberal. You're supposed to be coming out of the progressive movement. One of the biggest points of advocacy is diversity, right? Diversity is our strength. Diversity is so important. Anybody who even questions immigration, even uncontrolled immigration, is a racist. Okay, right. So why are you supporting a state that is premised on the idea that you have to maintain a certain majority population and stop immigration, and otherwise the state would collapse, right?
Well,
isn't that everything you're supposed to be against?
The premise would collapse. That's why I'm saying, like, the one state solution is actually very moderate. It's very sensible. It's saying one state where everybody has equal rights. Not saying the Israelis have to go. Not saying Israel can't be there anymore. It's got to be one state with equal rights. And yeah, those are some deep wounds that are going to take a long time to heal. You know what? We have the same thing in this country. We have deep wounds that are going to take a long time to heal. Probably will never fully heal. That's called building a nation. Right. You don't say, no, we're not willing to go through that. We need a two-state solution. That's cowardly, and you're maintaining an apartheid system by doing that. Anyway, let's see if we can get through this without stopping it every 2 seconds.
With what I said. And I believe that on the level of what's going on in Gaza right now, my everything that you said a couple of minutes ago about Bobby and about Biden, you are absolutely correct. I'm different than they are on
no, you're not.
All those things.
I mean, RFK,
and when it comes
not Biden.
to actual policy on
Yeah, all right. We made it a decent amount. That was better. Yeah, you're better than RFK. You're not better. Biden, the Democrats want a two-state solution. It's the same exact thing.
How are you better than Biden? You're making the claim you wouldn't have made the decisions that Biden made, but why wouldn't you? The decisions he's made have been consistent with the idea that Israel has an absolute right to maintain an apartheid state, but the Palestinians should also have a state. And they've condemned the settlements, which he keeps falling back on, which is another thing liberal Zionists always deflect to. So how are you different from Biden? In what way?
Yeah.
I'm with you. And that's where I'll stop. And I agree with that.
That's where I'll stop.
And I agree that, and as I said, what I believe. I mean, you could say, listen, I come from Texas, and there are millions of people trying to get into Texas from Mexico right now and from Latin America. I mean, you could, Mexico and Texas. It was ours.
I think that you could say that, and many people perhaps would say that.
Absolutely.
That was one of our best
and I think,
moments.
and I think even more pointedly, I mean, I don't know if you've had, I'm sure probably you have had this experience, but the experience of speaking to people for whom this isn't a kind of a historical abstraction, the way kind of the annexation of Mexico or the Mexico-American Wars might be to someone living in the 21st century, thinking about the 18th, 19th century. But these are people, these are people who have keys to homes.
I'm not having this. I'm not doing it. Brie, I'm not going there because I know where it goes. I know how circular it is. And at this point, I'm just not.
Okay, hang on one second. You're not going there because you do not concede that Israel was founded in an original sin, which was the Nakba, which was the forceful expulsion of the Palestinian people from their home. You do not acknowledge that that was an original sin. If you're not going to, quote, go there on that issue, what you're saying is that you believe that it was okay for Europe to hold Arabs responsible for the crimes of the Nazis. That makes you a Jewish supremacist and a white racist. That is what that makes you. There is no escaping that. And don't be indignant at the fact that people who care about this issue don't trust you, give you a side eye when you give answers like that. Because what you're saying is that the Nakba was not the original sin of the Israeli state. And that is a fucking racist thing to say and a racist thing to think. Let's just take this to a separate example. Let's say it's 1962 and you're marching for civil rights because you think Jim Crow is cruel and horrible and segregation is unjust, right? And you want black people to have equal rights. And someone marching next to you says, well, do you admit that slavery was an original sin of this country? And you say, well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going there. Well, of course they're not going to trust you.
Well, it's worse than that. You're arguing that we need to preserve the Confederacy.
Well, in this example,
needs
sure,
to
yes.
be preserved, but there should also be a northern state where there's no slavery.
Right.
The slaves should have a right. We should give them Minnesota or something.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm very aware, even when you and I have these conversations in private, but I'm aware that this is not in private. I'm aware that anything I say, and this is a moment where people will either like me and accept what I have to say or they don't. And I'm very aware of how much I say theoretically, since it agrees with certain things.
It's not whatever you say. You could say the right thing, which is that Israel has a lot of work to do to try and heal and try and make right its wrongful past. Just like the United States has a lot of work to do to heal and try to make right for its wrongful past. But that starts with admitting that, yes, you were founded in sin, just like this country was founded in sin. This country was founded in 2 Holocausts, one of the native peoples, one of the Africans.
Sure.
We have a long ways to go to make that right. We probably never will. We try as best we can. Israel has to go through that exact same process. That is what the one-state solution people are advocating. The one-state solution people are basically making the argument that we make in America, which is that, yes, we are founded in blood. We are founded in injustice. And that the project of perfecting the state is the project of doing right by that, not by denying that. And if you were to just say that, you wouldn't have a problem. It's not whatever I say they're going to come after me. No, you could get it fucking right.
Yeah.
How about that? How's that for an idea?
Well, that's a very narcissistic deflection from someone you might consider an airhead. Some people might say that's an airhead way to try to get out of having a meaningful conversation. In another section, actually, she says she does more fully respond to the idea of why there shouldn't be one state. And she says, well, can you imagine the bloody civil war that would ensue? I can't even imagine the violence. And Bree says she was great throughout this entire segment. Well, some would say that there's asymmetric violence being committed now. Like in the middle of a genocide, you say the problem with the idea of a one-state solution is the violence?
Right. There could be violence.
There could be violence. So she just because she went into this interview to defend her positions. I was just amazed what a dingbat she really is, that even on the level of being deceitful, she wasn't successful. She just strawmans, plays the victim. Everything that the people who left her staff claim in that Jen Dye's article, you see it all on display here.
Yes. And just to draw another parallel, we had a bloody civil war in America.
Yes,
we had a bloody civil war. Now, I'm not advocating for that. I don't want to see people fight each other and kill each other, but that's what's happening now. You can't, well, what if violence breaks out?
How about South Africa? They didn't end up having a civil war.
That's true. And
they had
some examples they don't.
And reconciliation commissions. They were an example to the world of how something like that can be negotiated without bloodshed. It was one of the most beautiful examples of humanity rising above its baser instincts.
Exactly.
How South Africa was unwound.
And we obviously hope that Israel could undergo that same process as peacefully as possible. Obviously. Is there a guarantee it stays peaceful? No, our country didn't do it peacefully. Our country had a civil war. We don't wish that upon Israel or anybody. But the idea that we can't do that because that would be too difficult, that's a bullshit argument. Look what's happening right now. Look what's been happening for the past 75 years. You've had a constant onslaught, a constant bombardment of violence. Well, we can't have one state because things could get violent. What are you talking about? Look, as Russell said, you're in a genocide right now.
Yeah.
You're in a genocide
We
right
wouldn't
now.
want violence.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see how she viscerally recoils when Bree brings up that there are people with keys. Right? Because they know they can't answer that.
They have no answer for that. Exactly. No answer. Dean Phillips has no answer for that. Marianne Williamson has no answer for that. Eventually, it comes down to that. Look, we are asked as white people in this country to bear a certain burden for the crimes that European settlers committed against the natives and against the Africans. We are all asked to bear a certain burden for that. Now, there is a debate as to how big a burden we bear and how we bear it. That's where you get into debates between leftists, liberals, conservatives, affirmative action, DEI, reparations, which is what I think is the only real way to actually settle that. But there's debate as to what burden we bear. The idea that white people in this country bear no burden is a fringe lunatic idea that is not acceptable amongst any real political sect that has any power. If you say the white person bears no burden in this country, you get set aside as a David Duke type. That's just crazy. That's considered crazy. So why aren't Zionists treated like that? Why is it more acceptable to say? Well, sorry, what was that?
Or a type who occasionally appears in our comments section.
Yeah, right. Or somebody. Right. Exactly. Right. So, like, if you say white people bear no burden, it was not, the Holocaust of the natives and the Holocaust of the Africans, the enslavement of the Africans, that wasn't a problem. If you say that, you are cast out. You are not welcome in political debate in this country. You are a fringe actor. So why is it that Zionists get to talk as if the founding of Israel was not an original sin? Why? That doesn't mean Israel can't exist. We still exist. We were founded in sin. We exist. We're not voluntarily taking ourselves off the map. That's not what we're advocating. That's what a one-state solution is. That's what Nick said in the interview. One state, equal rights. Well, but it's not that complicated unless you're a fucking racist or a brainwashed idiot who just can't deprogram themselves.
For them, Israel is an apartheid state by definition. If you get rid of the apartheid, it's not Israel anymore to them. And that is Zionism. Right. That is the Zionism that she refuses to own and wants to get into semantics about the meaning of the word and what it means to people and then get that completely wrong. Now, finally, we will point out, as many have, and as certainly we have, in this commentary space, I have said before, channels like ours, RBN, Hard Lens, INN, I think we represent a third wave of independent media that is actually sprung from the people. I think a lot of those early first and second wave commentators like the Young Turks, like Kyle, like Crystal, they came out of media. Both Crystal and Cenk worked for MSNBC. That is why they gravitated towards this narcissistic dingbat, because in the end, they are PMCs presuming to speak for the interests of working people and poor people. And in the end, their class blindness, even with the best of intentions, which a lot of them don't have, leads them to platform someone like Marianne Williamson, because it never occurs to them, as Nick pointed out in his interview with Marianne, working people don't have time for this shit. We don't have time for this shit. It's not a fucking game. It's not a game. You people are rich. You're rich. You're fucking rich commentators, and you're probably going to stay that way. Most of you came from wealth, and that's why they were the first wave. Because when you're raised with money and privilege, you assume that it's your place to speak for everybody. You have that confidence.
And you have the time to start up one of these operations without getting paid for 4 years. I mean, we were sharing time between driving pizzas and giving tours for 4 years before we could actually do this, right? Which extended the period of time where we could get an audience, because we couldn't do it as often in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, now we're starting to get to the point we can sell out. We're making inquiries.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
but it took a while. But
we have an interview with Israel Hayom next week. Yeah. Is that the outlet that Trump gave it to?
That's the business.
We'll see how it goes. We're gonna have to scrub the internet a little bit, but
yes, they have a class blindness, and hey, Briahna had that blow up with Norman, which I think she's redeemed herself for in this interview, but she was another one who she didn't promote Marianne the way some others did, but she said she's voting for Marianne. Why? And to this day, including in this interview, nobody has really gotten into the kind of shit in an interview with her that you see in that Jen Dye's article. And that, for me, is unforgivable, that you have not one random article. Sure, we wouldn't get into it either. Over 30 fucking years, and all of these people, Bree, obviously Crystal and Kyle, have interviewed her multiple times without litigating that. Yeah, a little question. Hey, there are some rumors of staff abuse. Nope, not true. Okay, let's move on. That's not getting into it. Nobody has really broken this down with her. And I have said since we started covering this, that is because of their class perspective. They see Marianne as one of them, someone they're comfortable with. Even in this interview, Marianne repeatedly references private, off-the-record conversations that they have. So you got to ask, why is this obviously deeply unserious, de facto cult leader who has built her career around not even her original work, basically hawking another work that she glommed onto and built her own fortune around, something that if you look at its background, I think most of these people who support Marianne would find the idea of basing your life around a book that the author believes was dictated to her by the voice of Jesus, would find that deeply disturbing. According to some of the stuff in the Dye's article, people in the campaign were asked to pray for higher TikTok visibility based on this Course of Miracles premise. So I think that is something, I'm not expecting it. Just like you always say with the mainstream media, after something like Russiagate blows up, it would be nice if they do some self-reflection now, but they never will. Same thing, man. All of these people really owe particularly the ones who really pushed her, they owe their viewers an apology and an explanation. I don't think anyone is forthcoming. Hey, we all fuck up. We all make mistakes. I've always said I went into 2015 supporting Hillary Clinton. All right, there's room to mend and to admit the error of your ways, but you need to do that. Otherwise, anybody who pumped this up as a serious proposition owes their viewers an explanation. And if you are among their viewers and you don't get that explanation, you don't get that apology, if you continue to take their perspective or their advice, their political advice seriously, you have no one to blame but yourself for the next narcissistic dingbat they tell you to line up behind.
When it comes to Bree, this was my instinct about it from day one. It remains my instinct about it now. I think in her case, it is more than anything else. I'm not saying there's none of what you said there. I think there is. More than anything else, I think she is a competitor. I think her days in the Bernie campaign, eating shit from these, centrist Democrats day after day after day for year after year after year, has given her a competitive drive where she really wants to crush them. And I think that has clouded her judgment because she feels like she's got to get behind somebody who's going to fight the centrists within the party. And I think that can lead you to a knee-jerk reaction to any candidate who says, I'm willing to do that. I think she feels like, oh, okay, this is something. But what we were saying from the very beginning is, no, it's not something. Just because you want it to be something doesn't mean it is something, right? And there's an opportunity cost to pretending that.
Well, that is something that maybe I will get to talk to her about personally at the Dissident Dialogues.
There you go. All right, go ahead.
But we have some exclusive footage. Now, we have aired this before, and we asked Marianne's campaign for comment. So far, we haven't heard back from them, but we did get one of the anonymous staffers, we can't name them, they signed an NDA, who shared with us some exclusive footage of a staff meeting at Marianne's house. So let's take a look at that. This is pretty shocking stuff, people.
You is when you say you have a lot of I would say to you is when you say you have a lot of Palestinian friends. How many Palestinian friends you have? I have a lot of Palestinian friends. You say you've talked to Palestinians. I have talked to Palestinians.
Now listen, on a personal level, I actually really like Bobby. And for what it's worth,
if you're not going to let me talk to the things you say, then there really is no point.
And so you touch something in people that honestly is more of like a spiritual thing. It's more of like an energy thing where people need to feel like there's something deeper in life. There's a greater...
You're doing a lot of mansplaining here, and you're telling me what is. You're asking me and then not giving me a chance to respond. So, and now more men are going to be laughing at me. So no, this is not working for me. There's a saying in AA, attraction, not promotion. I'm not going to be trying to manipulate anybody into seeing it the way I see it. I'm going to put out what I believe, and people will do what they want to do.
You see, she always falls back on that. Well, if you don't agree with me, you can do what you want to do. So that's pretty shocking stuff. You can see why they have such high turnover.
Yeah, high turnover. Campaign. Yeah, that's like working for Tyson Chicken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, worse.
Worse. Yeah.
All right. So, hey, if anyone's listening from the campaign, we're still waiting for an explanation.
Some people are genuinely curious in the chat what that is from. That's the Satanic Panic. The horror movie.
That was the movie, and most of Marianne's lines there are from that now infamous RBN interview.
Yes, indeed.
Please clap.